Pro-life victory. We're in Illinois with reaction to a Democrat's win in his primary election. Terror in Texas. The suspect in a series of mail bombs is dead, but the threat may not be over. We have the latest. Aid for Venezuela. The U.S. is sending money to fight an ongoing humanitarian crisis in South America.
I'm one of those people who has holy cards all around.
And today's Catholic woman. Part 3 of our series takes us to the White House, where we talk about the role faith plays for 2 of the president's top aides. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. 7-term Illinois pro-life Democrat Dan Lipinski narrowly squeaks out a win in a primary election. NARAL Pro-Choice America poured $1 million into his opponent's campaign. Pro-life groups are declaring victory for a vanishing breed of Democratic politicians who vote for the unborn. Jason Calvi joins us from outside of Chicago. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. I'm just miles from the iconic Willis Tower. When I was growing up here in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, it was the Sears Tower. But it's here that pro-life activists are celebrating the win of a longtime pro-life Democrat. But for Dan Lipinski, this race was too close for comfort. Dan Lipinski of Illinois' 3rd Congressional District survives the closest political race of his life. What does it say to the pro-life Democrats across the country?
I've never asked the Democratic Party to change its position on abortion, but I think that we have to be accepting of people who are pro-life. Again, that's building the Big Tent Party so we can accomplish the things that we all agree upon.
Lipinski beat Marie Newman, who is backed by NARAL Pro-Choice America, by just 1,500 votes. Today, Newman says, "We put him on notice that we expect better for all of the people in our district." Her slim loss could embolden other liberals. One group trying to oust moderate Democrats predicts progressives will win big in dozens of primaries this cycle. Pro-life group Catholic Vote also sees the impact this race could have nationwide.
There's a large war going on inside the Democratic Party between the establishment wing that's looking to just hold power and an insurgent radical left, primarily funded by the radical homosexual groups and the pro-abortion lobby. And those groups are attempting to take this party in a direction that I don't think America is ready for.
The group reached 60,000 practicing Catholic Democrats. And pro-life lobby group Susan B. Anthony lists also knocked on 17,000 doors. They tell us Lipinski's win sends a message to the whole country.
We hope that it persuades pro-life Democrats who say they're personally pro-life but aren't necessarily going to vote pro-life, that they will stick with their pro-life convictions, that you can win.
For 7-term Congressman Dan Lipinski, it's back to work at the Capitol.
I've always made a point that I'm fighting to restore the American dream.
Lipinski is all but assured of winning this fall. His Republican opponent isn't even backed by the party and is a self-proclaimed Nazi. Now, the GOP governor also had a primary race last night, incumbent Bruce Rauner, and he's been slammed since 2017 for signing into law a bill to put Medicaid funds into abortion. Pro-life groups rallied around his opponent, but still Rauner won. This fall, he'll be facing off against Democrat J.B. Pritzker, the heir to the Hyatt hotel chain. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, not on Capitol Hill, in Chicago. Thank you, Jason. The suspect in the deadly bombings terrorizing Texas is dead. Investigators say the 24-year-old suspect blew himself up as police closed in. A bombing spree rattling people in Texas comes to an explosive end. Investigators say they tracked a serial bombing suspect to a hotel outside of Austin. When the SWAT team approached, police say the 24-year-old man, identified as Mark Condit, killed himself.
The suspect is deceased and has significant injuries from a blast that occurred from detonating a bomb inside his vehicle.
Since March 2nd, 5 package bombings killed 2 people and injured several others. Police say the suspect was skilled and made sophisticated devices. But what investigators don't know is why.
We do not understand what motivated him to do what he did.
President Trump tweeting, Austin bombing suspect is dead. Great job by law enforcement and all concerned. But investigators warn more bombs may be placed around the region.
We are concerned that there still may be other devices out there, and we want to make sure that if people see suspicious packages or bags, that continue to call 911 and report that to the police.
The San Antonio bishop released a statement saying, in part, as we have seen time and time again, tragedies such as these strengthen our bonds and bring our communities together in prayer and recognition of the sanctity and preciousness of life. President Trump faces criticism from lawmakers in his own party for congratulating Russian President Vladimir Putin on his re-election. Senator John McCain calls it a sham election. The White House says it can't dictate how other countries operate. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Senator McCain says an American president, the leader of the free world, shouldn't congratulate dictators. And he's not the only one expressing concern. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley makes no bones about his thoughts on the Russian leader.
I think Putin's a criminal. What he did in Georgia, what he did in Ukraine, what he's done in the Baltics, what he's done in London, poisoning people with nerve gas, that's a criminal activity. I wouldn't have a conversation with a criminal.
We also heard from Senator Mitch McConnell. He says President Trump can call who he wants, but congratulating Putin wouldn't be his own priority because Russian elections lack credibility.
I'm always reminded of the elections they used to have in almost every communist country where whoever the dictator was at the moment always got a huge percentage of the vote. So calling him wouldn't have been high on my list.
The president tweeted today that President Obama called Vladimir Putin in regard to an election victory. That was back in 2012. The Washington Post reported that President Trump was warned by his staff not to congratulate Putin, but did anyway. Senator Marco Rubio says that raises another concern. Who is leaking information from the White House? A senior White House official says it's a fireable offense and likely illegal. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, that has been a problem. State-run media in North Korea says there is a sign of change in relations with the U.S. They also say the situation is improving with South Korea, calling it, quote, a dramatic atmosphere for reconciliation. The comments come 2 weeks after President Trump announced he would meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. ISIS strikes again in Kabul. At least 31 people are killed in a suicide bombing in Afghanistan's capital. The strike happened near a Shiite shrine during the Persian New Year celebrations. It wounded more than 60 people. An attack by ISIS in January, also in Kabul, killed 100 people. Myanmar's first freely elected president resigns, saying he wishes to take a rest. His government has denied claims of ethnic cleansing and killing thousands of Rohingya Muslims. His close friend, Aung San Suu Kyi, has been the de facto leader and is barred from being president. The country's parliament has 7 days to approve the nomination for the next president. 700,000 Rohingyas have fled to Bangladesh, and in Venezuela, hundreds of thousands are fleeing to escape hunger and poverty in that country. The Trump administration is promising $2.5 million for food and medical aid. It's the first time the United States is directly intervening. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby is in the studio, and he reports. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Mark Green, the head of USAID, says the money is aimed at helping Venezuelan migrants and the Colombian cities who are hosting them. Most of the aid will go to the city of Cucuta, which has been overwhelmed. For months, Colombia has borne the brunt of the mass exodus of Venezuelans. The bridge into the country is packed. The homeless fill the streets outside churches, and the hospitals can't begin to treat the thousands in dire need. This Venezuelan woman says she's fed her 3-year-old daughter potatoes, yuca, and vegetables, but it's not enough to give her little girl the nourishment she needs. Catholic Relief Services, the international humanitarian aid group, estimates that more than 2 million people have fled Venezuela because of violence and poverty, and twice that many are going hungry.
We're concerned about the people of the country.
Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin talking about Venezuela's humanitarian crisis during a G20 summit in Argentina. Mnuchin and others in the Trump administration are blaming President Nicolas Maduro's socialist government.
Our focus is on, how that economy is being destroyed, and with all its natural resources.
Mark Green with USAID adds, unfortunately, even as people are suffering every day from hunger, lack of basic necessities, and preventable diseases, the Maduro regime continues to deny fundamental freedoms and access to basic humanitarian needs. Maduro dismisses the United States and accuses President Trump of persecuting Venezuela by imposing sanctions. This week, President Trump banned Americans from using Maduro's newly announced cryptocurrency, the Petro. Back in Colombia, the Rome-based World Food Program and Catholic Charities have helped feed almost 2,000 people since the end of last year, but they know their work is far from over.
The crisis isn't just impacting Colombia. Brazil has also taken in thousands of migrants from its neighbor. The Brazilian president said the exodus of Venezuelans is unsettling Latin American countries, and his country's border states are also feeling the strain. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsby reporting. Thank you, Wyatt. Kosovo's opposition party uses tear gas to disrupt a parliamentary vote. The lawmakers were debating a border deal with Montenegro. The opposition says the country will lose 20,000 acres of land, but Parliament is set to ratify the proposal. The U.S. and EU support it. Boko Haram returned almost all of the 110 girls abducted from a boarding school in Nigeria last month, but they do so with an ominous warning. The Muslim extremists tell parents not to put their girls in school again. They say they released the abducted students, quote, out of pity. The government says no ransoms were paid. The girls are receiving treatment and meeting with counselors at a local hospital. Catholic leaders in Sweden are denouncing a political party's plan to ban religious schools. The Social Democratic Party says eliminating faith-based schools would help integrate students. Catholic educators fear the proposal would constitute a ban on religious freedom. For more on this story, including reaction of the country's cardinal, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. A bishop in Brazil is arrested on charges of corruption in Latin America's biggest nation. Police arrested Bishop Jose Ronaldo of the Diocese of Formosa and 4 other priests. Prosecutors say the clergy members diverted donations worth about $600,000 US. They are also accused of buying a cattle farm with money from the faithful. The head of the Vatican's communication department resigns over a scandal that's being called lettergate. Monsignor Dario Vigano is under fire for mischaracterizing a private letter from Pope Benedict XVI. Vigano read aloud part of that letter at a book launch about Francis's theology on the 5th anniversary of his pontificate. He held it up as a sign of the continuity between the two popes, but Vigano omitted parts of the letter, and now he's stepping aside. Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley joins us from Rome. Juliet, what did this letter say, and what did Monsignor Vigano omit?
It was from Pope Benedict to Vigano, and it dismissed criticism of Pope Francis' apparent lack of theological depth and the perception that the Pope Emeritus was all about theology and not a true pastor. Now, in the letter, Benedict also thanked Vigano for sending him an 11-book series on Pope Francis' theology. However, Vigano left out a part in which Benedict said he actually didn't read the books and that he didn't approve of the inclusion of one of the authors who had been a longtime critic of his and of JP2's.
Pope Francis has denounced fake news on more than one occasion since the beginning of his pontificate. How is this lettergate scandal going to impact his reform?
Well, although the resignation came with no mention of lettergate, clearly the scandal's embarrassing. It comes amid accusations the Pope's own communications crew are possibly spreading fake news, manipulations that violate basic journalistical ethical standards. That's what we are looking at, especially when it comes to representing the content of an image. Now, that said, this crisis is being dealt with at lightning speed, especially by Vatican standards, and it clearly indicates that the Holy See wants to move on as fast as possible and continue its reforms.
Juliet, what's next for the communications department at the Vatican? Is Monsignor Vigano still going to play a part?
Well, Pope Francis still needs Vigano's know-how in order to keep going with the reform. So he's given him a position of consultant within the department, and meanwhile, his second in command is taking over temporarily. Now that's Monsignor Lucio Ruiz, an Argentinian. It remains to be seen who will take over permanently.
Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, today's Catholic woman. We take you to the White House, where two top aides to the president discuss how their faith drives their work. In today's Catholic Woman segment, we head to the White House, and that's where two Catholic women serve as advisors to President Trump. They aren't afraid to profess their faith publicly. Before being named as White House Senior Advisor for Strategic Communications, Mercedes Schlapp was a well-known political analyst. As you can see here, she was a frequent guest on EWTN News Nightly. Helen Ferrer, White House Director of Media Affairs, was a Spanish-language journalist and headed Hispanic communications for the GOP. I sat down with both women at the Eisenhower Old Executive Office Building, located next to the White House, to talk about being a Catholic woman in politics. Welcome Mercedes Schlapp and Helen Ferrer to the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Mercedes, you have always been a passionate conservative voice and a Catholic voice. Are you able to use your Catholic voice in the White House?
Yes, I feel like I'm able to use my Catholic voice in the White House. My faith is very much a part of who I am. When difficult decisions are going to be made, I'm able to step back, pray, and really get the wisdom from God in what I do every day in my job and as I try to help lead our team. So I think that that's very critical.
I understand you have holy water somewhere?
I do. How did, goodness gracious, yes, there is holy water, which sometimes scares the staff when I start bringing it out and start sprinkling it on. But actually it was through my parish priest who gave it to me, and I brought it over to the White House as well. So it is very much a part, as well as the statue of the Virgin Mary in my office.
Helen, working in the White House is high pressure. How do you maintain your faith under these circumstances? Is it a problem?
For me, it's not a problem at all. It's not, to the contrary, it's what I rely on every morning and every night. I'm one of those people who has holy cards all around. I mean, I have them in my purse. I have one on my desk of the Virgin Mary. And I have that as a reminder because I need to always remember what's really important. So when I'm walking to work, I'm praying in Our Father and Hail Mary, and it helps me remember who I really am.
You have grown children, Mercedes. You have 5 children.
Yes.
I think women in our audience want to know, how do you balance things?
The balance does come with having a very big support system. Quite frankly, Grandma Sue, Matt's mom, she comes and stays with us 3 weeks at a time. What you find when you have a big family is that the older girls help out with the younger girls. I have my brother and my sister-in-law also living in the area. And I think we all understand, as I remind my children every day, whenever they're like, Mom, you're working late, I always tell them, think about those military moms and dads who are deployed in Afghanistan, Iraq. They're gone for 18 months at a time, and they don't get to see their kids. And so I just always try to remind my children that our nation, it's fragile. We have a democracy that we have a responsibility as people who are able to give back to defend.
Helen, what role did faith have for you in joining the White House?
People who are not of faith don't understand that we don't leave our faith, our religions in the pews in church when we walk out. We have to live that way, and it's part of our conscience and who we are. And so the ability to have an administration that really advocates for that, that stands for that, that fights for it, is really important. And so that made a big difference for me.
When I was in secular media, I was told I was not allowed to wear my cross on television. What's the message you would have to women who fear retribution for showing their faith at work?
I think that there are lots of ways of showing your faith, but I think that for me, the religious symbol of wearing a cross, I think that should be honored and that should be respected. But I would say that it's how we live our faith that's really ultimately the biggest and most important lesson.
Mercedes, women are expected to play a significant role in the upcoming midterm elections. This is an interesting statistic. 74% of women, Catholic women, intend to vote in the midterm election. What do you want Catholic women to know about President Trump?
President Trump is a champion for the religious community. And I find that the president understands that for too long, and in the past administration, there was a sense of trying to silence those of us who were religious.
There is no question about it. There was a bullying. There was a shaming to be one of those who felt that life was sacred in all its ways and needed to be protected and defended. And so now we have an administration that helps provide a broader platform for people to feel more comfortable.
And I think that for the president, it is about giving that access to people of faith.
Mercedes, President Trump is the most pro-life president we have ever seen. And he has supported several other issues really important to Catholics: conscience rights, religious freedom. Are you pleased with the progress the president and this White House have made on these issues?
Yeah, I'm incredibly pleased by the progress that the president has made. And he obviously addressed those that participated in the March for Life this past January. That, of course, being a historic moment for this president. And it's very heartfelt.
EWTN News Nightly covers these stories every single day. But when you look at mainstream media, rarely is it covered. And if it is covered, it isn't positive. So how important is it to your offices to get coverage of these issues onto mainstream media?
The mainstream media obviously has a very different agenda, and as we've seen time and time again, some of these media celebrities actually mock Christians, are critical of Christians, and they don't stand up for average Americans, for everyday Americans who practice their faith. That is why we have to spend every day of our lives protecting America and ensuring that every individual has the right to speak up, that every individual has the right to practice their religion. And that's one of the reasons why I know Helen and I work hard every single day to make sure, along with the president and the team, to make sure that we protect our freedoms.
Thank you so much, Mercedes Schlapp, Helen Foray, for joining us. In tomorrow's segment, we look to the next generation of Catholic women. I sit down with a young firebrand, the founder and executive director of Girl Talk. It's a nonprofit group that brings moral support to high school and college-age girls. Now, she tells me the group's philosophy is deeply rooted in her faith.
Everything is informed with that beautiful Catholic teaching that we are made in the image and likeness of God, right? That we have dignity and that we are worth it and worthy. So every time we talk to the girls, we tell them that you are enough, you are worthy, and you are loved.
She also talked about being authentic. Uh-oh, you see me eating cupcakes there. Let's get that off of there. I talked to girls involved in the program about navigating life's challenges as a young Catholic woman. And yes, cupcakes were involved and eaten. Yesterday on Facebook, I asked you to share your stories of the Catholic women in your life. And I want to share a couple of comments I received that really touched me. Holly Duggan writes, "Thank you for introducing this feature, highlighting women who are actively integrating their faith into real-life stories like these. They are needed. My journey includes Catholic women in my life who stayed at home and gifted me with time and care, as well as those using their talents to lead others spiritually or in modeling making ethical decisions in the business world." Gosia Maria Sanchez says, "I would like to give mention to pro-life OBGYN Dr. Monique Rubero, who works with women in the Philadelphia region. She has been an important voice in our community and an inspiration to me personally." Keep your comments coming at facebook.com/Lauren Ashburn, EWTN. Up next, the Pope confirms a trip to a Catholic country in August. We'll tell you where he's heading. And the Vatican announces how the Holy Father will spend Holy Thursday.
What we say is that the world is better with you.
Today is World Down Syndrome Day, a day to celebrate the lives of people with Down syndrome. Down Syndrome International encourages everyone to learn the vital role they play in our communities. Idaho signs a pro-life bill into law. It requires women seeking abortions to be told the drug-induced procedure can be halted halfway through. The legislation, signed by Republican Governor Butch Otter, goes into effect July 1st. And Republican lawmakers in Ohio introduce a proposal to ban all abortions. The bill calls a baby in the womb an unborn human person and would allow criminal charges against pregnant women seeking abortions. Pope Francis confirms he will visit Dublin in August for the World Meeting of Families.
Ho intenzione di recarmi a Dublino.
The Holy Father made the announcement at the end of his weekly audience. Ireland is nearly 80% Catholic, but in recent years, the country has legalized gay marriage despite objections from the Church. In May, Ireland will hold a referendum on overturning a constitutional ban on abortion. And finally, tonight, Pope Francis will wash the feet of 12 prison inmates on Holy Thursday. It will take place at Rome's Central Prison and fits with his mission to take the Church to the margins of society. The washing of feet symbolizes our willingness to serve others, and it imitates what Jesus did for his disciples at the Last Supper. It's effective. Some prisoners have cried when meeting the Pope. What a lovely conversion story that is. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn from snowy Washington, D.C. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and at Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. We're going to leave you tonight with more images from the Pope's general audience today at the Vatican. Good night, and God bless you.